Part 4.2 The Twofold Faith. In classical theology, supernatural faith, fides qua creditur, is the subjective principle of knowledge. Faith means the submissive reception of the truths put forward by the supernatural revelation of God. God, in general, is the material object, but the formal object of classical theology is the true God as he is known by the faith through revelation. As a science proceeding from faith, theology has, in addition, human reason as a special principle of knowledge, by which it permeates the contents and context of the organism of supernatural truth, and, as far as possible, seeks to understand it. Fides quaerens intellectum. Faith corresponds to revelation. As the concept of revelation in classical theology undergoes a drastic change in the new theology of Cardinal Wojtyla, so too the classical concept of faith. The twofold revelation goes hand in hand with a twofold faith. The first premise of, quote, faith corresponds to the axiom of universal salvation as revelation a priori, since it concerns the inner hidden fact of, quote, existence in Christ, as the innermost depths of man, the, quote, mystery of man, which is enlightened through, quote, revelation offered in Christ. This transcendental, a priori revelation, as such, can have no concrete empirical object of, quote, faith, but is only the condition for the reception of a future, empirical, historical, a posteriori revelation. As a pre-existing transcendental structure of human existence, however, this a priori revelation generally takes its course on the journey of the human spirit to God. Like the fact of a priori revelation, so too the a priori faith is universal among men. In the Theologia Naturalis, the Cardinal defends the thesis that man is capable, on the basis of his personal transcendence, of receiving the God of infinite majesty in the endless inner space of his mind, and to experience him mystically. From thence it follows that all men who, on the basis of the, quote, wonderful transcendence of the human spirit, end quote, are, quote, united in the church of the living God, end quote, page 17, can also, in their respective religions, attain genuine revelation, experience, and knowledge of God. But also, in the outside world through creation, all men have access to God. For, quote, all believers, no matter what religion they profess, have always understood him to speak and make himself evident in the discourse of creatures, end quote, page 33. Members of all religions are thus, quote, believers. Their, quote, faith is not dogmatically laid down, but is rather a faith in humanity common to all religions. Footnote. See an expert in comparative religion, Friedrich Heile, Erscheinungsformen and Wesen der Religion, Stuttgart 1961, in Die Religionen der Menschheit, Christel Matthias Schröder, Stuttgart 1961, Volume 1, page 17, quote, due concern for spiritual matters constitutes faith in a certain respect, yet by no means faith in the sense of dogmas stemming from a particular theological school or religious denomination. The greatest researchers of religion were men of faith, but men of a universal faith, a faith in humanity. They believed in God's revelation, but in his revelation in all religions of humanity. End quote. End footnote. In the Cardinal's Theologia Revelata, he defends the thesis of universal salvation according to which each man possesses, quote, existence in Christ, as the transcendental foundation of his humanity. Since Christ, who enlightens every man, John 1:9, has penetrated the heart of each man in which he is active, it follows that the innermost depths of the human spirit can or must lie at the root of something a priori authentically Christian in the faith and consciousness of anonymous Christians, so that even in non-Christian religions, authentically Christian values and truths are found. Does not Vatican II say as much in Nostra Aetate, number 2, where it points out the Father's teaching on the so-called logoi spermatikoi? Translator's footnote, i.e., seeds of the Word, a Greek expression borrowed from Stoicism, principally by Clement of Alexandria and St. Justin Martyr in the 2nd and 3rd centuries after Christ, in order to designate certain elements of truth still present in heathen religions, these truths being either natural values of integrity, e.g., respect for parents and the aged, or simply traces of biblical revelation, e.g., notion of sacrifice and expiation. In all fairness, however, we must observe that neither Clement nor Justin would have dreamed of viewing these logoi spermatikoi as means of salvation proper to these false religions. Indeed, the same fathers do not fail to remark therein elements of the occult and the diabolical. Thus, a naively optimistic view of these false religions, even though the individual members be sincere and honest people, is no accurate appraisal of these religions as seen in God's eyes. Sincerity is plainly not enough. End footnote. At this point, various statements of Karl Rahner and Karl Wojtyla become clear. With Karl Rahner, the, quote, coming unto oneself of the anonymous Christian, by which he then becomes a, quote, reflex-conscious Christian, is purely a transition of consciousness from the existentially given state to the categorically conscious state, in the sense of a thorough existentialist idealism. This is not present in Karl Wojtyla's system. He likewise finds a transition of consciousness necessary on the basis of his thesis of universal salvation, only he emphasizes the a posteriori revelation. It is Christ who, quote, reveals to man his deepest human existence, quote, but he does so by revealing the Father and the Father's love, end quote. Thus, the a posteriori revelation performs the function of midwife in the process of, quote, making conscious. Here is shown the great proximity between Cardinal Wojtyla and Henri de Lubac. With that, we come to the second premise of, quote, faith, which corresponds to the Cardinal's a posteriori conception of revelation. The a priori receives its empirical historical object in the a posteriori revelation. Faith means, therefore, the acceptance of, quote, the revelation which in Christ is offered to men, end quote, but as a means of enlightening the true being of man's existence. After this, the Cardinal can use the entire traditional vocabulary of empirical historical revelation, but it undergoes an anthropocentric, nominalistic transformation in the process. Just as the, quote, revelation offered to man in Christ has an, quote, anthropocentric character, so also the faith corresponding to it. Let us briefly recapitulate the content of this twofold faith in universal salvation. man experiences that he is permanently united to the Son of God through the Incarnation, is saved and justified through Christ's death on the cross from the beginning to the end of the world, and possesses, quote, existence in Christ as the religious dimension of his own human existence, and owes everything to the love of, quote, God the Father. Since the work of redemption is basically accomplished in each man, in whom the image and likeness of God is also kept intact, the revelation offered in Christ can only serve to enlighten human experience, and thus the corresponding, quote, faith can only mean the enlightenment of human consciousness. Therefore, man must go into himself in order to discover himself in light of revelation faithfully received, which is offered to him in Christ, and thus finally experience that which he always was and is deep down. That is the meaning of the Cardinal's phrase, quote, "The mystery of man is explained in the mystery of the incarnate Word," end quote. This brand of faith calls to mind the gnosis, ancient or modern. Translator's footnote: Gnosis is the Greek word for knowledge, and has come to mean a system where salvation consists not in submitting the mind to fixed dogmas and obeying a moral code, but rather in the possession of a quasi-intuitive knowledge of the mysteries of the universe. This system was historically associated with pantheism, idealism, and religious syncretism. The reader will readily notice the tie-ins with modernism, the, quote, cosmic Christ, Assisi, and the New Age movement. Among other things, it is the confusion of philosophy and mysticism. End footnote. We may thus maintain the principles of knowledge of revelation and faith in Cardinal Wojtyla's New Theology have an existentialist, anthropocentric character, so that one can speak of an anthropocentric theology, of a transcendental anthropology, and of a theology of man. It leads automatically to a, quote, fundamental anthropocentrism. See Cardinal Siri. The Cardinal's New Theology provides an extensive foundation for interreligious dialogue. The, quote, Church of the Living God, page 17, unites all men. Universal salvation is the common basis. The concepts of revelation and faith are not proper to the Catholic religion. All religions contain genuine revelation. The faith encompasses all believers in all religions. Genuine faith is faith in humanity. But, quote, revelation, which is offered to man in Christ, end quote, thus the Christian faith, is, for Cardinal Wojtyla, the faith in which the, quote, mystery of man, quote, existence in Christ, is, quote, enlightened once and for all. Footnote: Mutatis mutandi. One could perhaps describe this position of the Cardinal, which follows from the thesis that all are redeemed, with the words of Karl Rahner, who presents his position with the following words: the non-Christians, quote, are already anonymous Christians, and the Church is not the community of them who possess, as opposed to those who lack God's grace, but the community of those who can profess explicitly what they and the others hope to be. It may seem presumptuous to the non-Christians that the Christian considers salvation and sanctification in every man as the fruit of the grace of his Christ, and as anonymous Christianity, and regards the non-Christian as a Christian not yet come to himself by reflex. But the Christian cannot abandon this presumption. It is indeed an occasion for himself and the Church for the greatest humility, for it allows God to be, once again, greater than men and the Church. The Church will meet the non-Christian of tomorrow with the statement expressed by Paul, "What therefore you worship, and indeed worship in ignorance, I proclaim to you." Acts 17:23. As a result, one can be tolerant, modest, and yet unbending towards all non-Christian religions. End quote. Schriften zur Theologie, 1962, page 158. This, quote, offer is thus by no means necessary for salvation, nor is it exclusive or binding. There is also revelation, faith, and the experience of God in other religions. On the basis of religious liberty, interreligious dialogue as a brotherly exchange of religious experiences for the sake of mutual enrichment is the primrose path towards universal religious harmony. The question remains to be answered. Is the new theology of Cardinal Wojtyla also the theology of Pope John Paul II? And if so, does it constitute the theological core of his papal encyclicals?